Padre Pio once spoke about something most people never consider: that death does not end awareness, does not close the eyes of consciousness, does not sever all connection between the departed and those still living. What changes is not capacity to see, but what is seen. The dead, Padre Pio said, see the living with a clarity the living cannot imagine. See not appearances, but reality. See not what is said, but what is meant. See not performance, but truth. And what they see, when they look back at the family members they left behind, often brings either profound peace or devastating sorrow. This understanding came to Padre Pio not through theological speculation, but through direct encounter. Throughout his years of mystical experience, souls would appear to him, sometimes seeking prayers, sometimes offering messages, sometimes simply present in ways that allowed him to perceive what they were experiencing. And one pattern emerged consistently. Every soul, after death, looked back at its family, saw them, observed them, witnessed how they lived in the absence of the one who had died. And that witnessing mattered, shaped the soul's experience, created either consolation or anguish, depending on what was seen. The first thing souls see, Padre Pio explained, is grief. This is natural, expected. The living mourn. They cry. They struggle with the absence. And the dead souls see this grief. But what they see is not just the surface emotion. They see beneath it. See what the grief actually is. See whether it is love, mourning loss, or guilt masquerading as sorrow. See whether it is genuine connection broken or obligation performed. See whether the tears are for the person lost or for the disruption caused. And this distinction matters profoundly. Padre Pio encountered a soul who had died leaving behind a devoted wife. The wife wept constantly, attended Mass daily, spoke of her husband endlessly. To all appearances, she was devastated. But the husband's soul, when it appeared to Padre Pio, was not consoled by this grief, was instead troubled by it, because he could see what the living could not, that her grief was not primarily about missing him. It was about losing the identity she had constructed around being his wife, about the disruption to her comfortable routine, about the fear of being alone, about the loss of social status that came with widowhood. Her tears were real, but they were for herself, not for him, and he saw this, understood it, and felt the loneliness of being mourned without being missed. This distinction between being mourned and being missed is one most people never make. They assume grief is singular, that crying means caring, that visible sorrow equals deep love. But Padre Pio learned from the souls who appeared to him that grief takes many forms, and not all forms bring consolation to the dead. Some grief is about the person lost, about the hole their absence creates, about memories of who they actually were and what they actually meant. This grief, even when painful to witness, brings peace to the departed soul, because it means they mattered, meant something, were known and are missed genuinely. But other grief is about the living person's disruption, about what the death cost them, about how it changed their circumstances, about their fear or inconvenience or loss of support. This grief, however genuine it feels, brings no consolation to the dead, because it is not really about them. It is about the living person's own experience. And the dead soul, seeing this clearly now, understands that they were valued for what they provided rather than who they were, that they were useful rather than loved, and that recognition, even after death, carries pain. The second thing souls see is truth. Specifically, they see whether the living are being honest about the relationship that existed. Padre Pio noticed that many families, after a death, engage in a kind of collective revision. They speak of the deceased in elevated terms, emphasize the positive, minimize conflicts, create a sanitized version of who the person was and what the relationship involved. And the dead soul hears this, sees it, and must process the gap between the revised narrative and the actual reality. A woman died after years of difficult marriage. Her husband, at the funeral, spoke movingly about their love, about her devotion, about the life they built together. People wept, were touched by his obvious grief. But the woman's soul, appearing to Padre Pio, was not comforted by these words, because she knew the truth, knew the years of coldness, the emotional distance, the parallel lives lived under one roof, the loneliness of being married but unknown. And now her husband was creating a story that never existed, not from malice, but from guilt, from the need to believe he had been a better husband than he was, from the human tendency to revise history once it is too late to change it. What troubled her soul was not anger at the dishonesty. It was grief over the lost opportunity. If he could speak this way now, why could he not have lived this way then? If he could recognize her value in death, why could he not see it in life? If he could express love at her funeral, why could he not show it during their marriage? The words he spoke over her coffin were the words she had waited 30 years to hear. And hearing them now, when they could no longer change anything, was almost worse than never hearing them at all. Padre Pio said that souls see these contradictions with painful clarity, see family members who speak beautifully at funerals about relationships that were actually hollow, see children who eulogize parents they rarely visited, see spouses who weep publicly over marriages they neglected privately, see friends who claim deep connection while having made no effort to maintain it. And the souls understand that the living need these narratives, need to believe they loved better than they did, need to reconstruct the past to ease their guilt. But understanding does not remove the pain of witnessing the gap between what is said and what was lived. The third thing souls see is how the living move forward, how they adjust, what they do with the absence, how they honor or fail to honor what the relationship meant. And this matters more than most people realize, because it reveals whether the connection was real or was simply circumstantial, whether the person is missed or merely the role they filled, whether love continues or whether it was conditional on presence. Padre Pio told of a mother who died leaving 3 adult children. The oldest child, within weeks, stopped visiting her grave, stopped speaking her name, moved forward as if the death had merely closed a chapter in a book. The middle child became obsessed with grief, built an altar, spoke constantly of the mother, made the death the center of every conversation. The youngest child did neither, simply lived, but lived differently, made choices with the mother's values in mind, honored her memory not through performance but through becoming. And the mother's soul, watching all three, was consoled only by the youngest, because the oldest's forgetting felt like erasure. The middle child's obsession felt like performance, but the youngest's quiet integration of the mother's influence felt like genuine continuation, like the relationship had not ended but transformed, like she lived on not in shrines but in choices. This is what souls want to see, Padre Pio explained. Not elaborate mourning, not constant reference, not frozen grief, but continuation. Evidence that the relationship mattered enough to shape the living person going forward. That values were transmitted. That love endures through influence. That absence does not equal erasure. They want to see their children living better because of what was learned. Their spouses honoring the marriage by becoming the people the marriage called them to be. Their friends carrying forward what the friendship meant. This continuation, quiet and unperformed, brings more consolation than the most elaborate funeral or the most expensive monument. But many families, Padre Pio observed, do the opposite. They freeze the relationship in death, create shrines but do not grow, speak constantly of the dead but do not embody what the dead valued, perform mourning but resist transformation. And the souls see this, see love that was real being converted into performance, see memory being preserved while influence is rejected, see themselves being honored in word while being betrayed in life. And this creates a particular kind of sorrow, not anger, not resentment, but grief over potential unrealized, over love that could have continued bearing fruit but was instead sealed in the past. The fourth thing souls see, and this may be most important, is what the living do with unresolved matters. The things that were never said, never forgiven, never healed. Death does not erase these unresolved issues. It simply removes the possibility of direct resolution. And souls see whether the living carry these burdens forward or find ways to release them. See whether guilt paralyzes or motivates change. See whether anger hardens or softens. See whether the living learn from what was broken or repeat the patterns with others. A father died after years of conflict with his son. Hard words had been said. Distance had calcified. They had not spoken in the final years. And at the funeral, the son wept. But his tears were complicated, mixed with guilt, with regret, with anger that remained despite death. Padre Pio, seeing the father's soul, understood that the father witnessed all of this, saw the son's struggle, and what the father longed for was not impossible reconciliation. He knew his death had closed that door. What he longed for was release, for the son to forgive, not for the father's sake, though that would bring peace, but for the son's sake, so the son could move forward unburdened, so the anger could dissolve, so the pattern could break and not be passed to the next generation. This is what souls often see with clarity that the living lack. They see how unresolved wounds continue to poison, how carried guilt continues to damage, how nursed anger continues to harden, and they long not for their own vindication, but for the living to be free. They understand now what they often did not understand in life: that forgiveness is not weakness, that releasing grudges is not betrayal, that moving forward is not dishonoring memory. And they wish they could communicate this, could tell the living that holding on to the pain does not honor the relationship. It simply extends the damage. But they cannot speak directly, can only hope that somehow the living will discover this truth and choose freedom. The fifth thing souls see is how their death affects family dynamics. Death rearranges systems, removes a presence that maintained certain balances, and souls see whether the family adapts healthily or fractures. See whether their absence reveals strength or exposes cracks. See whether love holds people together or whether it was the dead person's presence that provided the only connection. Padre Pio encountered many souls who were distressed by what they witnessed after their deaths. Families that had seemed united revealing themselves to be held together only by the deceased person's effort. Children who had appeared close fighting over inheritances with shocking cruelty. Marriages that had included the deceased as third point of stability now collapsing without that stabilizing presence. And the souls saw that relationships they thought were deep were actually shallow, that connections they believed were loving were actually transactional. That family they thought was bonded was actually merely coexisting. This revelation brings souls profound sorrow, not because they are personally wounded, though there is that, but because they understand now what they missed while living, the truth that was hidden, the reality beneath the performance. And they grieve over time wasted maintaining what was already hollow, over effort invested in relationships that were not real, over love given where love was not actually present. They see clearly now and wish they had seen clearly then, had recognized the truth, had invested differently, had not spent their lives serving illusions. But Padre Pio also encountered souls who saw the opposite. Families that deepened after death. Children who came together to support each other. Marriages that honored the deceased's memory by becoming stronger. Friends who rallied. Communities that activated. And these souls found peace, because they saw that their life had built something real, that their influence had been genuine, that their presence had not been the only thing holding people together, but had instead taught people how to hold each other. This discovery, this evidence that their life mattered and their love endured, brought consolation even in the midst of their own separation. The sixth thing souls see, according to Padre Pio, is whether the living continue the mission the dead person valued. Every life has a mission, things that mattered, causes pursued, values embodied, priorities maintained. And death raises a question. Do these things die with the person, or do they continue through others? Souls see the answer. See whether children carry forward what parents valued, whether spouses maintain commitments that were shared, whether friends continue work that was started. And this continuation or abandonment matters deeply. A woman died who had spent years advocating for the poor in her community. Her work was known, appreciated. But after her death, her family, rather than continuing her mission, focused entirely on their own comfort, used her estate for vacations and luxuries, spoke fondly of her charitable nature, but did not embody it. And her soul, seeing this, grieved. not because she needed validation, but because she understood that her life's work would die with her, that values she had tried to transmit had not been received, that all those years of modeling generosity had produced children who valued comfort above compassion. The grief was not for herself, but for what could have continued but would not. Conversely, Padre Pio told of a man whose children, after his death, established a fund that continued his charitable work. They did not do this for show, did not publicize it, simply identified what their father had valued and ensured it continued. And his soul, seeing this, felt a peace that words cannot capture. Because his life had borne fruit that would outlast him. His values had been transmitted. His influence would continue. Death had taken his body, but had not stopped his mission. And this continuation mattered more than any monument or eulogy ever could. The seventh thing souls see is time. They see the living moving forward, days passing, seasons changing, life continuing without them. And this creates complex emotions. Relief that those they love are not frozen in grief, but also a strange loneliness at being increasingly distant. Recent memory becoming old memory, active presence becoming past reference. This is natural, necessary. The living must continue, but souls see it happening, see themselves fading from daily thought, see the space they occupied being filled by other things, see life closing over their absence like water over a stone. And this is both as it should be, and somehow sad. What souls hope to see, Padre Pio said, is not that they remain the center of the living's attention. That would be unhealthy. They hope instead to see that their influence continues even as their presence fades. That lessons taught remain even as daily memory dims. That love shaped the living in ways that endure even as the specifics of shared moments become less immediate. They hope to see themselves transforming from active presence to formative influence, from daily reference to foundational memory. This transformation is healthy, shows that the living are moving forward. But souls want to see that the transformation preserves what mattered rather than erasing it entirely. Padre Pio emphasized that souls do not want to be worshipped, do not want the living paralyzed by grief, do not want shrines that prevent growth. What they want is integration. They want the living to take what the relationship taught and use it, to take what the love meant and let it shape ongoing life, to take what the connection revealed and let it inform new connections. This is how love continues after death, not through preservation, but through transformation, not through freezing, but through flowing forward. The eighth and perhaps most important thing souls see is whether the living are moving toward God or away, because this is what ultimately matters. This is what determines whether separation is temporary or final, whether the family will be reunited or whether death has created permanent division. Padre Pio said that souls in heaven see their living family members with this question constantly present. Are they walking toward reunion or away from it? Are they pursuing holiness or abandoning it? Are they choosing heaven or risking hell? And this awareness shapes the soul's entire experience of the afterlife. A mother in heaven sees her adult son living without faith. pursuing pleasure, ignoring God, making choices that lead away from eternal life. And she cannot intervene directly, cannot force change, cannot make him choose differently. She can pray, can intercede, can hope that grace will reach him, but she must watch, must see him walking toward potential damnation, must face the possibility that death separated them temporarily in her passing, but might separate them permanently in his choices. This creates anguish even in heaven. Not the anguish that destroys heavenly peace, for heaven cannot contain such pain in its fullness, but a longing, a hope, a persistent prayer that the living will turn before it is too late. Conversely, souls see family members who, after their death, turned toward God, who used grief as catalyst for conversion, who recognized mortality and chose eternal over temporal, who began pursuing holiness with new seriousness. And these souls rejoice, because they see reunion becoming more certain, see the gap closing, see choices being made that will result in eventual reunion that will never again be interrupted. This brings consolation that transforms how they experience separation. Temporary becomes bearable when reunion is certain. Distance becomes tolerable when the path home is clear. Padre Pio said that if the living understood this, understood that their deceased loved ones are watching, are seeing, are hoping desperately for their salvation, it would change everything, would transform how people live after loss, would make them more serious about faith, more careful about choices, more aware that their lives matter not just to themselves and not just to the living, but to those who have gone before. That invisible cloud of witnesses is not metaphor, is actual reality. The dead see, the dead care, the dead pray, and the living's choices matter to them profoundly. What the living often do not understand is that death has given the deceased clarity. They now see spiritual reality clearly, see the stakes clearly, see eternal consequences clearly. They understand what the living often miss, that this life is brief, that choices matter, that eternity is real. And they desperately want the living to understand this too, before it is too late, before death closes the opportunity, before temporary separation becomes eternal. They see with eyes unclouded by earthly distraction. And what they see makes them pray without ceasing for those they left behind. This is the secret Padre Pio revealed, that the dead are not gone, not absent, not unaware. They see, they know, they witness how the living respond to their absence. And what they see brings either peace or sorrow, consolation or concern, joy or anguish, not in ways that destroy them, for those in heaven are beyond destruction, but in ways that matter, that shape their experience, that inform their prayers, that determine their longing. The living often think of death as the end of the relationship, as final separation, as complete absence. But Padre Pio taught that death transforms the relationship without ending it, changes the nature of connection without severing it. The deceased are no longer physically present, can no longer speak directly or act visibly, but they remain aware, remain concerned, remain invested in the well-being of those they loved. They see, they pray, they wait. and how the living choose to live in their absence matters to them more than most people realize. This is why Padre Pio urged people to live as if the deceased were watching, because they are. Live in ways that would make them proud, that would honor what they tried to teach, that would console them in their watching, that would give them peace rather than concern. Do not live for the dead in ways that prevent moving forward. That is not what they want. But live mindfully, honorably, in ways that integrate their influence and pursue the holiness that leads to reunion. This is how to honor the dead, not through elaborate mourning, but through purposeful living, through choices made with awareness that we are witnessed, that we matter not only to ourselves and to God and to the living, but also to that cloud of witnesses who have gone before. And perhaps most importantly, Padre Pio said, make peace before death when possible. Say what needs saying while voices can be heard. Forgive while forgiveness can be received. Heal while healing can be mutual. Love while love can be directly expressed. Do not wait. Do not assume there will be time. Do not leave things unresolved thinking, death will resolve them. It will not. It will only transform the possibility of resolution into the weight of permanent unfinished business. The dead see this weight. See the living carrying it. See opportunities missed. And they wish, too late, that they had acted while action was still possible. This is what souls see when they look back at their families. They see truth. They see clearly. They see what matters and what does not. They see love continuing or ending. They see influence preserved or abandoned. They see faith pursued or rejected. They see the living moving toward reunion or away from it. And what they see shapes their experience of death in ways the living rarely consider. The dead are not passive, not absent, not unaware. They are watching, praying, hoping, waiting. And how we live in their absence matters to them, matters deeply, matters eternally.